Welcome to Historic Auto Attractions in Roscoe, Illinois. Over 80,000 square feet of historic cars and American artifacts. This is one of the coolest unknown museums in the country. Let's go check it out. The museum starts off in the Wild West, where you can see film and television artifacts from everybody, including John Wayne, which they even have his personal shoehorn. There's also no shortage of wax figures in this museum. Over here they have actor Gary Cooper's original headstone when he was buried in Culver City, California. And here's a little bit of Hollywood magic. When you were watching TV shows or films in the 1940s, odds are when you saw a train go by, you saw this. For you Gunsmoke fans, there's even this outfit that was worn by James Arness. And here is the Gunsmoke piano. No exhibit to the Wild West would be complete without a 7-foot-tall man made of parts. Or a buffalo. We've named him Herman. In here is coaches and carriages galore, going from a U.S. mail carriage to vintage carriages to a Conestoga wagon, an original from 1798. That is pretty darn cool. They even have an original hearse wagon dating back to the 1860s. And if you look even closer, there is an original casket in here, along with a bill of sale for a funeral that cost $90 back in the early 1900s. This is a 1925 Ford Model T, but not just any Model T. This one was used by Laurel and Hardy in the short film Big Business. Get a load of this. That is a pretty sweet ride. What museum would be complete without Elvis Presley costumes? And a wall of Elvis artifacts? As well as these glasses that Elvis smashed against a wall in Reno, Nevada in a fit of rage. This is one of Elvis Presley's personal cars, and you can see him driving this car in the photo behind it. This is Mikhail Gorbachev's 1991 Mercedes Bulletproof Limousine. It is part of the World Leaders display here at Historic Auto Attractions. Let's take a little look in there. You guys can see just how thick this glass is. But if you think that's thick, just wait until one of the next things I show you. Here is Joseph Stalin's 1937 Packard armored limousine, and when they say armored, they mean it. This is a beautiful classic car, but let's take a look at here. Just look at how thick these windows are. This is probably a good 3 inches if I had to guess. I'll try to show you the inside of this as best as I can. Not a lot of light in here, but this is as good as we can do for this car. And this is Ulysses Grant's Studebaker Landau carriage. He got a speeding ticket in this thing. And everybody's favorite, the Hall of Wax Presidents. This may be the real Joe Biden right here. And as we go by, you'll notice a lot of other presidents. Some of these are a little bit better than others, but most of the presidents from the 1900s are represented here. There's JFK right here. Harry Truman, we have Herbert Hoover, U.S. Grant hiding in the back, George Washington, here's Honest Abe, and Andrew Jackson. And over here is the original funeral carriage that held the body of President William McKinley after he was assassinated in Ohio in 1901. This is the original carriage, and you can see video of this in use on YouTube. And if you like, or if you don't like him, President Donald Trump, this is the 2008 Lincoln Town Car limousine that he used when running for president. Love him or hate him, this is history. And over here we have Calvin Coolidge's car. Now let's take a look at what this says. This car was first delivered to then Vice President Calvin Coolidge in May of 1923 in D.C. After Coolidge became president, this became part of the White House fleet of cars. That is a real work of art. See if I can show you guys inside this. Now this was his personal car, so he did drive this one, so he probably didn't spend a lot of time in the back, but there would have been Cal's view. Pretty neat piece of history right here. And here's one of many presidential displays. This is from Harry Truman, and this down here was the inauguration book. This is a wall full of presidential autographs and from first ladies. Way too much to show you at once. But here is a handwritten letter by Mary Lord Harrison, who was the second wife of President Benjamin Harrison. They had a lot nicer handwriting back then. And just when you think you saw some presidential cars, here's Harry Truman's car. Back here is a car that belonged to Dwight Eisenhower. And as we keep on going, here's one from Lyndon B. Johnson. And there's another Lyndon Johnson back there. And Herbert Hoover's 1932 Cadillac. Isn't that a beauty? Show you the inside of that as much as I can. And here's another presidential limo from LBJ. I like how they put pictures next to all these cars. And this one over here is a presidential limo of Jimmy Carter. And if you get tired of walking, you can stop, sit down, and watch any number of historical documentaries going in this museum. And we can't forget Tricky Dick's Chrysler limousine. And this right here is where you get your money's worth here. This is Gangsterland, and this is my favorite exhibit in historic auto attractions. Right here is John Dillinger's 1932 Studebaker Commander. He used this on a bank robbery, but that's not the only interesting thing about this car. This car was also loaned for the filming of Public Enemies starring Johnny Depp. And here is one of John Dillinger's actual shirts. This is the George Barris Custom Bonnie and Clyde car. Not the original Bonnie and Clyde car, but the one used for the 1967 film Bonnie and Clyde, starring Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway. Now this is a very elaborate car. And they actually did shoot through this car with Thompson submachine guns. Over here we have a Bonnie and Clyde case. And this is one of the coolest things in the museum. And these are the original Bonnie and Clyde death hats. These are the actual hats that Bonnie and Clyde were wearing when they were gunned down in Louisiana in 1934. Over here is something that changed history, or maybe it did. This is the pistol that killed John Dillinger. Ballistics confirmed, but this is the actual gun that killed Dillinger. Speaking of Dillinger, he was killed at the Biograph Theater in Chicago. The movie he was watching was Manhattan Melodrama starring Clark Gable. This is the actual suit Clark Gable was wearing when he filmed that movie. And of course, everybody asks about Al Capone. This is one of Al Capone's original distributing trucks, equipped with beer barrels. And this is one of the other coolest things here. This is a 1930s bulletproof Chicago Cadillac gangster car. Do you see those holes in the windows? That's so that whoever was riding in this car could stick their guns out and they could shoot at their enemies. This was the original drive-by shooting mobile for gangsters in the city of Chicago. It's kind of a grim reminder, but this is also history, albeit dark history. But this car, I was told, was found in a garage or a shed, and it was purchased by the museum here, and it's been sitting here ever since. It was left exactly the way that they found it. And we'll take a little look inside there. If you could just think of what people might have been thinking last time they were actually sitting in this car, it's kind of crazy to think about. And here's a T-Rex made of car bumpers. Because if you can't make a T-Rex out of car bumpers, what's the point of life? And here is the original Moe's car. This is a one-of-a-kind prototype. If you notice, there was no doors in it. The only way you can get in this thing is from the back. This thing hatches up. Kind of a different type of vehicle, but a one-of-a-kind classic. And here's the famous Hal Woods Bicentennial coin car. You might ask yourself, what would cause somebody to want to cover a car with 120,000 bicentennial pennies, quarters, and half dollars? And the answer to that, I really can't tell you. All I can tell you is that it took several men 2 years to do this. But it's one of a kind. It was displayed in Vegas for a lot of years. It also drew a lot of celebrities around this thing. A lot of people wanted to see it. It is a very classic car, albeit a little bit weird, but you're never going to see another one of these because, quite frankly, I can't think of anybody else that would have the time or dedication to put something like this together again. But this is the famous Bicentennial coin car. And here is a 1914 Ford Model T. This is the first Ford to ever climb Pikes Peak. Happened in 1916. And for you NASCAR fans, they have race suits worn by Dale Earnhardt and Dale Earnhardt Jr. Historic Auto Attractions is also the home of the Illinois Stock Car Hall of Fame. So you can come in here and check out the history of your favorite local Midwest drivers. And here's one of Richard Petty's original cars. He won a couple of the first races of his career in this car. That is pretty simple for the time period if you compare it to today. And here is a Mark Martin race car. They also do have several NASCAR cars here as well. This one belonged to famed NASCAR driver Tim Richmond. Behind it is a car that was used by NASCAR legend Bobby Allison. And over here we have two cars that were used by Dick Trickle, NASCAR legend. And this one is chopped in half so you can see the other side of this chassis. And here's the war room. Over here they have uniforms that were actually worn during the attack on Pearl Harbor. And talk about pieces of history. This is the fireplace mantle from the White House. This is the exact mantle where Harry Truman signed the order to drop the atomic bomb in 1945. Right here, history happened right on this ledge. Talk about an event that changed the world. And here's the hat that was worn by Paul Tibbets, who was the pilot of the Enola Gay that dropped the atomic bomb. And down here they have tons and tons of war hats, war uniforms from all different eras. If you come and visit, the war room is an absolute must. There is a lot to see in here. And hats from just about every era. And here's a mock-up of a 20th century American farm. And an 1859 Hunneman and Company hand-drawn manual tub pumper for you firefighters. And over here we have Miss Belvedere, America's failed time capsule. This thing was buried in 1957, a 1957 Plymouth Belvedere. They put it down for about 50 years. It was supposed to be a time capsule. They put it in an underground vault. The vault flooded, and it became just a big embarrassment to the city of Tulsa. Here's the inside. Looks a little bit like a shipwreck. But the city of Tulsa did not want this displayed in their city, so it found its way back to historic auto attractions right here. If you want to read a little bit on the history, feel free to pause it right here. And here's a collection of presidential wall clocks. These are wall clocks that were in the White House at the time of various administrations. This is from Zachary Taylor's era. This one is from Dwight Eisenhower's. This one's from the Calvin Coolidge era. President Hoover. This bigger one is from Harry Truman's time in the White House. The William Howard Taft administration. This one's from FDR's time in the White House. And this is the coolest one and the oldest one. This is from Andrew Jackson's time in the White House. And down this hall, you guessed it, we have more cars and more artifacts. Starting with this case from Patsy Cline, the famous country singer. You can find her hat, her boots, wigs, blouse, dress, and other items. And over here, this case is items that belong to Hank Williams. A couple of his original shirts, his hats, and this shirt, you can see him wearing it in the picture behind it, and his glasses. And as we keep going, this is the limousine from the Playboy Mansion. This was parked in the driveway at the mansion. It's a 1967 Lincoln Continental limousine. If the walls and upholstery in this car could talk, there's a look on the inside. And this was Howard Hughes' automobile. And here is the chariot from the 1959 film Ben-Hur. That is a pretty cool piece of Hollywood history right there. And to have this in such a small museum. Here is Thomas Edison's eyeglasses. And right next to it is one of the cooler things, I think, from film history. If you guys like National Treasures with Nicolas Cage, you might remember him using these glasses in the film. Here is a picture up here of him wearing those glasses. That glare doesn't help. There you go. And Colonel Sanders' white suit and signature bow tie. Boy, if I could have one thing in this museum, it'd probably be that suit and tie. This is his 1939 custom Lincoln limo. And you can see right back here it has the CS on it for Colonel Sanders. And this is shoes and a dress that were owned and worn by Mary Todd Lincoln, wife of President Abraham Lincoln. Take a good look at these shoes down here and tell me if you know anybody today that could fit in these shoes. And here's the Lincoln exhibit. Let's go in here and see what kind of relics we can find. They have this beautiful carriage on display. They have so many things in here, I could never possibly show you everything, but this is the drapery cord from Lincoln's Springfield home. So he probably touched this cord on a regular basis. Lincoln's original coffin handles. As you guys may or may not know, Lincoln's coffin was too big for his original sarcophagus. And this is a blood-stained handkerchief and the coin that was placed over Lincoln's eyelid after he passed away. Pretty grim days in American history. And this was one of Abraham Lincoln's White House chairs. This came from his personal study next to the Oval Office, and as you can see, this thing got a lot of use. I was told this was one of Lincoln's favorite chairs. And over here we have the checker cab that was used by Lee Harvey Oswald. Lee Harvey Oswald got into this cab after the JFK shooting. He would have sat right back in these seats. He didn't say a word to the cab driver. And this is John F. Kennedy's 1962 Lincoln. He used this when touring around. And this is from a sad day in American history, November 22nd, 1963. This was the Secret Service follow-up car that was behind the JFK car. Now, this is a one and only car. You can only see it at historic auto attractions. This is one of the most historic cars out there. The original JFK limousine is at the Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan. And it's also not really an original car, but this one is. As you can see on the back, there's steps for the Secret Service to ride on the back. And if we go around here, there's also side rails which Secret Service agents would have been lined up on. And here is a collection of dresses that were owned and worn by Jackie Kennedy. She had pretty exquisite taste. All of these belong to Jackie. And they even have the wedding suit that Lee Harvey Oswald wore. And over here is the original O'Neill ambulance. This is the ambulance that after Jack Ruby shot Lee Harvey Oswald, took Lee Harvey Oswald to Parkland Hospital, the same hospital they took JFK to when he was shot. Now over here, there's a picture of him loading him into the ambulance. And that happened right here. You can actually smell the history in this place. And this is a model of Air Force One. And if you ever remember the infamous video of Marilyn Monroe singing Happy Birthday, Mr. President to JFK, that was at his birthday party at Madison Square Garden. This is the original cake topper from that event. It was saved by a police officer who hung on to it for over 30 years, and then when he passed away, his wife sold it for auction, and it sold for almost $10,000. There's even a space exhibit. And we have a Ghostbusters car here. There is a Back to the Future DeLorean. And the Flintstones mobile, as well as an outfit from the film. And over here we have Batmobiles. There are 3 Batmobiles here. And this third one over here is an original. This is a one-of-one Bat missile from Batman Returns from 1992. And over here we have a Looney Tunes car driven by Bugs Bunny himself. And if you're ever on a pilgrimage to see a moose, look no further, because they also have a Wagon Queen family truckster. Most of you probably remember this scene right here. And Aunt Edna is still on the roof. And if you're a fan of Gone with the Wind, they have several different outfits that were used in the film. The one on the left by Vivian Leigh, and the one in the center, the tuxedo coat, was worn by Clark Gable as Rhett Butler. And just when you think this museum is missing something, you can pet an animal. And there's a moose. And even bears coming to say goodbye. Here is a zebra and a giraffe. Now the animal exhibit is the final exhibit at Historic Auto Attractions. Now for a couple of questions that I usually get, Historic Auto Attractions is open seasonally. They are open Tuesday through Sunday, and I believe adult tickets are $28, kids are a little bit less, but let me tell you, it is really, really worth it. If you come on the weekends, ask to talk to Tony. He will give you a personal tour and tell you all kinds of background information on everything in this museum. He is a walking encyclopedia of knowledge, and I highly recommend it. But that's the tour for today. Thank you so much for joining me on this adventure, and be sure to like and subscribe for future videos. Take care from myself and these fun furry animals.